Seraphina was 6 years old when darkness became her world. She remembered that autumn morning with the cruel clarity that trauma brands into memory. The great hall of Moonshadow Estate draped in black silk. Her father's body lying in state, his face peaceful in death, his hands folded across his chest as if he were merely sleeping. The scent of white lilies choking the air until she could barely breathe. Lady Vivian had stood beside the casket, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief, accepting condolences from the gathered nobles with practiced grace. But Seraphina had seen. Even at 6 years old, she had noticed how her stepmother's tears never quite reached her eyes, how Vivian's gaze kept drifting toward the estate documents the solicitors carried, how her fingers drummed impatiently against her thigh whenever someone spoke too long about Lord Theron's virtues. The funeral ended at sunset. The last mourners departed as darkness crept across the estate grounds. And then Vivian's mask had fallen away like dead leaves from a winter branch. Cold fingers wrapped around Seraphina's wrist, not the gentle touch of a mother comforting a grieving child. This grip was iron, possessive, cruel. "Come with me," Vivian had said, her voice stripped of all pretense of warmth. "There's something we need to discuss about your future." Up the stairs they went, past the family quarters, past the guest rooms, past the servants' floor. Up and up, through a door Seraphina had never noticed before, into a narrow stairwell that spiraled toward the highest point of the estate, the North Tower, the place even the servants whispered about in hushed, fearful tones. The room at the top was small, a narrow bed with threadbare blankets, a wooden basin for washing, shelves lined with dusty books that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades, a single window that faced the northern mountains, too small to climb through, too high to jump from. "You'll stay here," Vivian announced, releasing Seraphina's wrist with a shove that sent the child stumbling. "From now on, this is your home." Seraphina's young voice trembled. "I don't understand. What did I do wrong? Please, I want to go back to my room. I want—" "What you want doesn't matter." Vivian's green eyes glittered with something that made Seraphina's stomach clench with fear. "Your copper wolf is a threat to my daughters. No one can know you exist. The servants will be told you died of grief, following your father into death. How tragically poetic." A smile curved her lips, sharp as a blade. "As far as the world is concerned, Seraphina Thornwood ceased to exist tonight." The door slammed shut. A key turned in an ancient lock, and then came the sound that would haunt Seraphina's nightmares for 20 years, the hiss and crackle of silver being activated, enchanted silver, woven into the door's frame, designed to burn any werewolf who touched it. A prison crafted specifically for her kind. She screamed. She pounded on the door until her small fists were bloody. She called for help until her voice gave out. But no one came. No one ever came. That night, alone in the darkness, Seraphina made a promise to herself. She would survive. Whatever it took, however long it took, she would survive. And someday, somehow, she would make Vivian pay for every tear, every bruise, every stolen moment of the life that should have been hers. 20 years passed. 7,300 days. Seraphina had counted every single one. She'd scratched marks into the stone beneath her bed, tiny lines that chronicled her imprisonment. 10 marks made a row. 10 rows made 100. And now, at 26 years old, those marks stretched across the floor like the scars of some great battle. The tower room had become her universe. 8 paces from wall to wall, 12 paces corner to corner. She knew every crack in the stone, every draft that whistled through the ancient mortar, every pattern the moonlight made as it crawled across her floor through the changing seasons. But Seraphina had refused to let that universe break her. The books that lined her shelves, dusty relics abandoned by some forgotten prisoner, had become her salvation. In the first months of captivity, when despair threatened to swallow her whole, she had reached for them out of sheer desperation for distraction. She'd taught herself to read properly, sounding out words by candlelight, building her vocabulary one painful syllable at a time. By her 10th birthday, she had devoured every book in the tower at least twice. By 15, she'd read them all 5 times over, and had begun to truly understand their contents. history, politics, military strategy, mathematics, philosophy, 6 different languages from ancient texts, their grammatical structures mapped and memorized during endless sleepless nights. Her body she trained with equal discipline. The small space allowed for few exercises, but Seraphina had invented routines that pushed her muscles to their limits. She did push-ups until her arms trembled, squats until her thighs burned. She practiced stances and strikes from the military manuals, shadowboxing against enemies she couldn't see, preparing for battles she might never fight. Her mind she sharpened through meditation. For hours each day, she would sit perfectly still, breathing deeply, learning to control the restless wolf that prowled within her. The copper wolf, the creature Vivian had feared so much, had never been allowed to emerge. But Seraphina could feel her presence constantly, a warmth in her chest, a growl at the back of her thoughts, a companion in solitude who whispered encouragement when darkness pressed too close. Together, they had become one. Woman and wolf, fused through 20 years of shared imprisonment, their thoughts and instincts so intertwined that Seraphina sometimes couldn't tell where she ended and the wolf began. Her window, small though it was, had become her connection to the outside world. From that narrow vantage point, Seraphina could see the estate's main courtyard, the gardens where nobles walked and talked, the training grounds where guards practiced combat. She watched everything. She memorized everything. She knew the names and faces of every important visitor who came to Moonshadow Estate. She recognized the subtle power dynamics between Vivian and the other pack leaders. She understood the political landscape of the werewolf territories better than most who actually lived in it, piecing together alliances and rivalries from overheard conversations and observed interactions. Once a week, old Marta climbed the tower stairs with food and supplies. The elderly servant was the only person Seraphina ever saw, the only voice besides her own that she heard. Marta was terrified of being caught. She moved quickly, left the basket by the door, and fled back down the stairs before anyone might notice her absence. But sometimes, on rare occasions, she would linger for a precious few moments. "The Northern Kingdom sent an ambassador last month," Marta might whisper through the door. "They say the new Alpha King is reforming everything, giving Omega's rights. Can you imagine?" Seraphina treasured those fragments of information like precious gems. She filed them away, connected them to other fragments, built a mental map of the world she couldn't see. The Northern Kingdom, Alpha King Kaelan, the reforms, the political tensions, the rumors of war and peace and everything in between. Her hair had never been cut. It fell in thick copper waves all the way to her ankles now, a burden she'd learned to manage by braiding it into elaborate patterns or piling it atop her head in coils. The color was striking, vivid copper that seemed to hold captured firelight, that glowed like embers in the candlelight. Beautiful, perhaps, but also a constant reminder of her imprisonment. 20 years of growth, 20 years of captivity. "One day," she would whisper to her wolf while watching the moon through her window, "one day we'll be free, and when we are, we'll make Vivian pay for every moment she stole from us." Her wolf would growl in agreement, patient, waiting, trusting that their time would come. On an autumn evening, 20 years to the day since her imprisonment began, Seraphina sat cross-legged on her bed, reading an ancient text on kingdom law by candlelight. The book was falling apart, its binding crumbling, but she handled it with the care of a scholar preserving priceless manuscripts. This particular volume detailed succession rights and challenged claims, useful information perhaps for a future she still dared to imagine. She turned a page, and a folded piece of paper fluttered out. Seraphina's breath caught. In 20 years she had never found anything hidden in these books. She had read them dozens of times, studied them cover to cover. How had she missed this? Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. The handwriting was familiar, achingly, heartbreakingly familiar. She had seen it on documents her father signed, on letters he'd written before her world collapsed. "My dearest Seraphina, if you are reading this, then I am dead, and my worst fears have come to pass. I write this letter in haste, for I believe my time is short. There are things you must know, things that may save your life if you can survive long enough to use them. You carry the blood of the fireborn, my child, the purest manifestation of this gift in 500 years. Your copper wolf is not a curse, as some would have you believe. It is a sacred blessing from the moon goddess herself. The power within you can create flames that protect without burning, that heal instead of harm, that can shield entire armies from their enemies. There are those who know what you are, those who would use your gift for their own ambitions. I have received word that agents of a powerful lord in the northern kingdom have been asking questions about you, about your wolf, about the color of your fur. This lord, whose name I dare not write even here, has been building alliances in secret. He seeks to control the fireborn power, to use it as a weapon for conquest. I plan to take you away, to hide you somewhere safe until you are old enough to protect yourself. But I fear I will not have the chance. The danger is closer than I realized. The threat comes from within. If I die, trust no one in Moonshadow. If you somehow escape your prison, find General Magnus in the Northern Kingdom. He was my brother-in-arms 30 years ago. He owes me a life debt. Tell him who you are. Tell him Theron sent you. He will protect you. I love you, my daughter. I am sorry I could not protect you. But I believe in you. Survive. Grow strong. And when the time comes, let no one stand in your way. Your father, Theron. The letter fell from Seraphina's numb fingers. Her father hadn't died of illness. He had been murdered. Murdered because he tried to protect her. Murdered by someone connected to the Northern Kingdom, someone powerful enough to reach across territories to silence a threat. The threat comes from within. Vivian. It had to be Vivian. But Vivian was a schemer, not a mastermind. She didn't have the connections or the resources to orchestrate something this complex. Someone had used her as a tool. Someone had paid her to keep Seraphina alive, but imprisoned, like a prize horse being held for a future owner. The wolf inside Seraphina snarled with rage so intense it made her vision blur. 20 years stolen not just by a jealous stepmother, but by some shadowy figure who wanted to harvest her power like a crop. She forced herself to breathe, to think. Rage was useful, but only when controlled. She had learned that lesson through 2 decades of meditation and discipline. She would find out who killed her father. She would discover who had orchestrated her imprisonment, and she would destroy them. But first, she had to survive. First, she had to escape. As if in answer to her thoughts, her wolf suddenly went on high alert. Every instinct inside Seraphina began screaming. Something was different. Something was close. Something was coming. She rose from her bed and moved to the window. Down below, in the moonlit gardens of Moonshadow Estate, she saw torches flickering. A delegation had arrived. Important visitors, judging by the number of guards and the quality of their horses. Seraphina pressed her face to the cold glass, straining to see. A tall figure stepped into the torchlight. A man, impossibly tall, with broad shoulders and the commanding presence of someone born to lead. His hair was dark auburn, long enough to brush his shoulders, catching the firelight with hints of deep red. Even from this distance, Seraphina could see the scar that crossed his left eye, a pale line that spoke of battles survived and enemies defeated. Something stirred in her chest, a warmth she had never felt before. Her wolf, usually so controlled, suddenly pressed against her consciousness with desperate urgency. The man stopped walking. His head turned slowly, deliberately, scanning the estate as if searching for something. His gaze traveled up toward the North Tower. Toward her window, their eyes met across the darkness. Amber. His eyes were amber, glowing with an inner light that cut through the night like twin flames. And in that moment of connection, Seraphina's world shattered and reformed into something entirely new. The mate bond hit her like a physical blow. She staggered backward, gasping, as every cell in her body suddenly ignited with recognition. Mate. The word echoed through her mind like a bell being struck. Mate, mate, mate. Her wolf howled within her, demanding she run to him, reach him, claim him, be claimed by him. But Seraphina forced herself to breathe, to think. 20 years of isolation had taught her absolute control over her reactions. Even now, with the mate bond burning through her veins like wildfire, she kept her head. Who was he? She knew that face. She had seen it in documents, in sketches that visitors sometimes carried. The scar, the auburn hair, the commanding presence. Alpha King Kaelan of the Northern Kingdom. Her mate was the most powerful werewolf in 3 generations. Below, she watched him break into motion. He ran toward the estate building, disappearing from view as he entered through the main doors. She could hear voices now, raised in alarm. Vivian's shrill protests, a male voice, deep and authoritative, demanding answers. Footsteps thundered on the tower stairs. Closer and closer, climbing the spiral staircase that no one had climbed except old Marta in 20 years. "Open this door!" The voice echoed through the stone corridor, so powerful that Seraphina felt it vibrate in her chest. "Now!" "Your Majesty, please!" Vivian's voice was high with panic. "That tower has been abandoned for years. There's nothing. Do not lie to me." The growl that accompanied those words made the walls tremble. "I can feel my mate. She is here behind this door. And if you do not open it in the next 3 seconds, I will tear it down and you will be arrested for obstruction of the Alpha King." "I do not have the key." Vivian's desperation bled through every word. "It was lost when—" The sound of splintering wood cut off her lies. Seraphina watched in disbelief as the enchanted silver door, the barrier that had held her prisoner for 2 decades, was ripped from its hinges like paper. She saw Kaelan's hands, burned and bleeding from the silver, still gripping the twisted metal. She saw him cast it aside without a glance at his own wounds. She saw his amber eyes find her in the darkness of her cell. And then he stood before her. Kaelan was even more imposing up close. Easily 6'5", built like a warrior who had spent his life in battle, with broad shoulders and arms corded with muscle. The scar across his left eye was more pronounced in the candlelight, a pale slash that somehow made his features more striking rather than less. His dark auburn hair fell in waves past his shoulders, and his amber eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that should have been terrifying. Instead, Seraphina felt something she hadn't experienced in 20 years. Hope. He entered the room slowly, his movements careful, deliberate, as if approaching something precious and fragile. His eyes swept the space, the narrow bed with its threadbare blankets, the stacked books with their crumbling spines, the washing basin with its chipped enamel, the small window that had been her only view of the world for 2 decades. His expression shifted, relief at finding his mate alive, horror at the conditions she had endured, and then fury, pure and absolute, that transformed his features into something almost frightening. Seraphina did not flinch. She did not cower. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze directly. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Not for him specifically, but for the moment when someone would finally open that door. She would not waste it by appearing weak. "How long?" Kaelan asked, his voice dangerously calm. Behind him, Seraphina could see Vivian hovering in the doorway, pale as death, trembling with fear. Good. Let her tremble. Let her feel a fraction of the terror she had inflicted on a 6-year-old child. 20 years, Seraphina answered. Her voice was rough from disuse, but steady. She would not let it shake. "Since my father died, Lady Vivian told everyone I perished of illness. She locked me here to hide my copper wolf, afraid I would outshine her own daughters." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kaelan turned slowly to look at Vivian, his amber eyes blazing with barely contained rage. "You," he said, each word falling like a death sentence. "You imprisoned your stepdaughter, a child of 6 years, in a tower for 20 years. "I can explain, Your Majesty." Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. "She is dangerous. Her wolf is—" "Silence!" The alpha command in his voice was absolute, irresistible. Vivian dropped to her knees, unable to resist the pure power behind that single word. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Kaelan raised his hand, and two massive warriors appeared in the doorway. His elite guard, Seraphina realized, the Shadow Guard, legendary soldiers who answered only to the Alpha King himself. "Arrest her," Kaelan commanded. "She will be tried for unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, and crimes against a member of the royal mate bond. Take her to the carriages and ensure she speaks to no one." The guards moved forward to grab Vivian's arms, but as they hauled her to her feet, she twisted toward Seraphina. Her eyes, wide with terror, held something else, something that looked almost like warning. "You think I acted alone?" Vivian hissed, her voice breaking through the Alpha command with desperate force. "You think I had the resources to maintain an enchanted silver door for 20 years? To bribe servants into silence? To erase a child from existence?" A laugh, high and slightly mad. "I was only the keeper of the cage, little wolf. The true master wanted you alive, wanted you to grow, wanted you to ripen." Her smile was terrible. "And now you have stepped into the light. Now he will come for what is his." The guards dragged her away before she could say more. Her screams echoed down the tower stairs, fading slowly into silence. Seraphina's blood ran cold. Her father's letter had spoken of a powerful lord in the Northern Kingdom. Vivian's words confirmed it. Someone had been pulling strings for 20 years. Someone with resources and patience and a plan that was only now coming to fruition. And she had just been handed directly to the Alpha King of that same Northern Kingdom. Kaelan turned back to her, his fury softening into something gentler as he took in her appearance. The pale skin from 20 years without sunlight, the thin frame from rationed food, the massive braid of copper hair that pooled at her feet like spilled fire. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice impossibly gentle after the rage he had displayed moments before. "Physically, I am functional," Seraphina replied, choosing her words carefully. "Malnourished, lacking sun exposure, but nothing that cannot be corrected." She paused, then added with a touch of dry humor. "Mentally, I expect I will have nightmares for the rest of my life, but I am sane, I am rational, and I am very, very angry." Something flickered in Kaelan's amber eyes. Respect, she realized. He was looking at her not with pity, but with admiration. "You are my mate," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact. "I feel the bond," Seraphina confirmed. "And you are Alpha King Kaelan of the Northern Kingdom. You took the throne at 24 after your father died at the Battle of Mist Pass. You spent the next 3 years fighting the border war, which you won by implementing small unit tactics that your enemies could not counter. You have reformed Omega rites throughout your territory, earning both praise and criticism from traditionalists. Your council consists of 12 members, 4 of whom secretly support your uncle Lord Aldrich, who many believe should have been regent during your early reign. Lord Aldrich, incidentally, is currently standing in the garden below, pretending not to watch this tower with considerable interest." Kaelan stared at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, a smile spread across his scarred face. "How do you know all of that?" Seraphina gestured to the books around them. 20 years is a very long time. I read everything available to me. From my window, I observed every visitor, every meeting, every political discussion held in the gardens below. When you cannot do anything else, you learn to use your mind." She met his eyes steadily. "I know more about your kingdom's politics than most of your own nobles. I know the names of your enemies and the vulnerabilities of your allies. I have had 2 decades to study and analyze and plan." "Extraordinary," Kaelan breathed. "You are absolutely extraordinary." "I am pragmatic," Seraphina corrected, "and I have a proposal for you, Your Majesty." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "A proposal? We have known each other for less than 5 minutes. And yet our wolves have already decided we belong together." Seraphina took a step closer, her chin still lifted, her gaze unwavering. "You need a Luna. Your council has been pressuring you to mate for years. I can solve that problem, But more than that, I can be useful. I spent 20 years studying politics, strategy, pack dynamics, kingdom law. I speak 6 languages. I have an excellent memory for faces, names, and political alliances. She took another step, close enough now that she could smell him. Pine and leather and something wild, something that made her wolf purr with satisfaction. "But I will not be a trophy," she continued, her voice hard as steel beneath the silk. "I will not be a decorative figure paraded at ceremonies and ignored in council chambers. If I am your Luna, I will be your partner, your advisor, your equal, or I will be nothing at all." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Kaelan began to smile. Not a polite smile, but something genuine, reaching his amber eyes and making them glow with warmth. "I have been searching for my mate for 8 years, he said softly, refusing every political match my council suggested, insisting that somewhere, somehow, I would find the one meant for me. And now I understand why the moon goddess made me wait." He extended his hand toward her, not reaching to touch without permission, simply offering. "I accept your proposal, Lady Seraphina. Come with me. I will take you from this tower, this estate, this life. I will give you freedom, resources, and the chance to prove yourself. And if, after you have recovered and had time to decide freely, you wish to be my Luna, my partner, my equal, then we will discuss terms. But if you decide you want something different, I will help you build whatever life you choose." Seraphina studied his face, looking for deception, looking for the catch, but she saw only sincerity, and beneath that, hunger, the same hunger she felt, the pull of the mate bond demanding they come together. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you offer me a choice? You are the Alpha King. You could simply claim me. No one would object." Kaelan's expression softened. "Because you have been controlled enough for one lifetime. Because a mate who chooses to stand beside me is worth 1,000 who are forced. And because I want you to trust me, Seraphina, not because of the bond, not because you have no other options, because I have earned that trust through my actions." Something cracked inside her, something she had built walls around for 20 years to protect herself from hope, from disappointment, from wanting things she could never have. Seraphina placed her hand in his. "Very well, Your Majesty. I will come with you. I will give you the chance to earn my trust." A small smile curved her lips. "But I should warn you, I have very high standards. 20 years of reading about honor and duty and loyalty have made me quite particular about what I expect from the people around me." Kaelan laughed, a rich sound that seemed to fill the small room with warmth. "I would expect nothing less from a woman who has survived what you have survived." He glanced at her hair, the massive copper braid that trailed across the floor. "Do you need help with that?" "I can manage it," Seraphina said, already gathering the length. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, coiling the braid and pinning it atop her head. Even constrained, the copper mass was impressive, a crown of fire that caught the candlelight. "It is beautiful," Kaelan murmured, "like sunset captured in silk." Seraphina felt heat rise to her cheeks, the first time she had blushed in 20 years. "It is also impractical. I had planned to cut it once I found a way out of here." "Do not," Kaelan said quickly, then caught himself. "I mean, it is your choice entirely, but consider keeping it. It is a warrior's trophy, proof of 20 years survived, proof of strength maintained despite everything designed to break you." Seraphina looked at him with new appreciation. He understood. The hair was not just hair, it was evidence of endurance, a visible reminder of everything she had overcome. "Perhaps I will keep it a while longer," she allowed. "Now, shall we go? I find I am quite eager to breathe air that does not smell of stone and captivity." They descended the tower stairs together. Kaelan stayed close but did not touch her, allowing her to maintain her dignity and independence. At the bottom, Seraphina saw 24 wolves waiting in human form. Elite warriors, all of them, with the hard eyes and ready stances of soldiers who had seen combat. They watched her with curiosity and what looked like respect. A woman with silver-streaked auburn hair stepped forward, tall and fierce, with scars on her arms and a sword at her hip. "Alpha," she said, her voice crisp with military precision. "The prisoner is secured. Lord Aldrich is asking questions. What should I tell him?" "Winter, this is Seraphina," Kaelan said, his voice carrying a note of pride that made Seraphina's wolf preen. "My mate." "Have accommodations prepared immediately. Best suite at Blackstone Castle, full medical team, and I want our top healers standing by." Winter's eyes widened as she took in Seraphina's appearance, the pale skin, the massive copper hair, the obvious signs of long imprisonment. But she recovered quickly, her expression settling into professional neutrality. "Of course, Alpha. And Lord Aldrich?" A flicker of something passed across Kaelan's face. "Tell my uncle I will speak with him when I am ready. And Winter, I want eyes on him at all times, discreetly. Report anything unusual directly to me." Winter nodded and shifted into a magnificent silver wolf, disappearing into the night. Seraphina filed that exchange away. Kaelan had noticed her comments about Aldrich. He was already suspicious of his uncle, or at least willing to consider the possibility of treachery. Good. He was not blinded by family loyalty. That would make things easier. The other warriors formed a protective circle around them as Kaelan led Seraphina outside. The first breath of fresh air in 20 years hit her like a drug. She stumbled, overwhelmed by sensations she had almost forgotten existed. The scent of pine trees, the dampness of recent rain, the vast openness of sky stretching endlessly above her. Kaelan caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy," he murmured. "Take your time." Seraphina stood there, just breathing, drawing air into lungs that had known only stale tower atmosphere for 2 decades. Tears streamed down her face without permission, and she did not care. Let them fall. Let them wash away 20 years of grief and loneliness and rage. She was outside. She was free. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finding me." Kaelan's hand tightened gently on her arm. "Thank the moon goddess for leading me here, for making sure I was the one to come on this diplomatic mission, for the mate bond that pulled me to that window." He paused. "I have waited 8 years for you, Seraphina. I would have waited 8 more if that was what it took." A figure emerged from the shadows of the garden, an older man, distinguished-looking, with silver at his temples and a pleasant smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to power, accustomed to being obeyed. "Nephew," the man said, his voice smooth as silk. "I heard there was some commotion. I came to see if I could be of assistance." His gaze slid to Seraphina, and something flickered in those calculated eyes. "And who is this remarkable creature?" "Lord Aldrich," Kaelan said, his tone carefully neutral. "May I present Seraphina Thornwood, my mate?" Aldrich's smile widened, but Seraphina saw the calculation behind it, the rapid assessment, the adjustment of plans. "Thornwood," Aldrich repeated, as if testing the name. "Any relation to the late Lord Theron of Moonshadow?" "His daughter," Seraphina replied, watching Aldrich's face carefully. "His only child, though I was told everyone believed me dead." "How remarkable." Aldrich stepped closer, his eyes traveling over her copper hair with undisguised interest. "Theron's daughter, alive after all these years, and with such striking coloring. I have heard stories about copper wolves, of course, the fireborn bloodline, quite rare." His smile showed too many teeth. "Quite valuable." "Quite capable of deciding her own value," Seraphina returned coolly. "And quite observant. For example, I noticed that you arrived at this estate 3 days ago, supposedly for trade negotiations. Yet I have watched you spend more time studying the North Tower than attending any meetings, almost as if you were waiting for something. Or someone." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Aldrich's smile never wavered, but something shifted behind his eyes. A reassessment, a recognition that this was not the broken, easily manipulated creature he had perhaps expected. "You have sharp eyes, Lady Seraphina," he said finally, "and a sharper tongue. I was merely curious about the old architecture. The North Tower is a fascinating example of pre-war construction. He inclined his head. I look forward to knowing you better. I am certain you will be a most interesting addition to our court. He turned and walked away, his guards falling into step behind him. Kaelan waited until Aldrich was out of earshot before speaking. You just made an enemy? No, Seraphina corrected. I just revealed one. There is a difference. She looked up at Kaelan, her amber-brown eyes meeting his amber gold. Your uncle is dangerous. He has been watching this tower for days, which means he knew I was here. He spoke of fireborn wolves with the familiarity of someone who has studied them, and he looked at me the way a merchant looks at valuable cargo. Kaelan's jaw tightened. Aldrich has been my uncle for my entire life. He helped raise me after my father died. He has served on my council for 8 years. And those are all excellent reasons why he would be the perfect person to orchestrate a 20-year conspiracy, Seraphina said quietly. Close enough to access resources, trusted enough to avoid suspicion, patient enough to wait for the right moment. She paused. I am not asking you to condemn him based on my word alone. I am asking you to watch, to consider, to look at the evidence with eyes unclouded by affection. Kaelan was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I will watch, he agreed. I will consider. But I will also need proof before I move against my own blood. His hand found hers again, warm and steady. Can you give me that? Seraphina's fingers curled around his. I have spent 20 years learning how to find patterns, how to connect pieces that others overlook, how to see the truth hidden beneath pleasant lies. If your uncle is the enemy I believe him to be, I will find the proof, and when I do, I will present it to you. The decision of what to do with it will be yours. Partners, Kaelan said softly. Equals. That is what you proposed. That is what I proposed. He smiled then, that genuine smile that transformed his scarred face into something almost beautiful. Then let us begin. Let me take you home, Seraphina. Let me show you the Northern Kingdom, and let us see what we can build together. The journey to the Northern Kingdom took 3 hours by wolf. Seraphina could not shift yet. 20 years without shifting meant her wolf needed careful reintroduction, a gradual process that would take weeks or months. So Kaelan carried her in his arms while his elite guard ran alongside them in wolf form. She should have felt vulnerable, cradled against his chest as the world blurred past them. Instead, she felt safer than she had in 2 decades. His arms were strong and steady. His heartbeat was a constant rhythm against her ear. His scent surrounded her, pine and leather, and something wild that her wolf recognized as home. The Northern Kingdom was breathtaking. It sprawled across mountains and valleys, with dense forests and rushing rivers and buildings that seemed to grow from the very rock. Even in the darkness, lit only by moonlight and distant torches, Seraphina could see the evidence of careful planning. Roads maintained to military standards, watchtowers at strategic intervals, settlements positioned for maximum defensibility. This was not just a pack territory, this was a kingdom, and the man carrying her had built it from the chaos left by his father's death. Blackstone Castle rose from a mountainside like a natural extension of the rock itself. Dark stone walls stretched toward the sky, imposing and impregnable, yet somehow welcoming in the way the windows glowed with warm light. The main gate opened as they approached, guards saluting Kaelan with obvious respect and curiosity. "Welcome to your new home," Kaelan said as they crossed the threshold. "Or at least, to the place I hope will become your home." Inside, the castle was warm and well-appointed. Thick furs covered the floors. Roaring fireplaces drove away the mountain chill. Servants moved efficiently, setting out food and drink without being asked, demonstrating the well-oiled organization of a properly run household. An elderly woman waited for them in the great hall, silver hair and kind eyes, a healer's insignia on her sleeve. "Alpha," she said, bowing slightly. "Winter sent word ahead. I am Alara, the pack's head healer. I have prepared everything you requested." "Alara, this is Seraphina," Kaelan said, setting Seraphina carefully on her feet. "My mate. She has been imprisoned in a tower for 20 years. Deprived of sunlight, proper nutrition, and unable to shift, she needs a thorough examination and a recovery plan. Ilara's eyes widened with compassion and barely controlled anger. 20 years. The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow, but she recovered quickly, her manner professional as she approached Seraphina. "Hello, dear," she said gently. "I am going to examine you, make sure everything is as it should be. Is that all right?" Seraphina nodded, appreciating that Ilara asked permission rather than simply proceeding. A small courtesy, but meaningful to someone who had been denied choices for so long. The examination was thorough, but gentle. Ilara checked Seraphina's eyes, her teeth, her joints, her reflexes. She asked questions about symptoms and diet and exercise routines. When she finished, her expression was grave, but not hopeless. "Severely malnourished," she reported to Kaelan. "Vitamin deficiencies from lack of sunlight. Muscle atrophy from limited movement space, though less than I expected. Her wolf has been suppressed so long that reintroduction will need to be extremely gradual." A pause. "But there is no permanent damage. With proper care, she will fully recover." Kaelan's shoulders sagged with relief. "See to it. She is to have anything she needs, anything at all." "Of course, Alpha." Ilara turned to Seraphina, her eyes soft with understanding. "I will have food brought to your rooms, a special meal plan to address the nutritional deficiencies, and I will prepare tonics to help your wolf begin the reintegration process. Rest now. Your body has been through an ordeal. It needs time to remember what it feels like to be free." After Ilara left, Kaelan escorted Seraphina to her suite. The rooms were enormous compared to her tower cell. A sitting room with comfortable furniture, a bedroom with a massive 4-poster bed covered in silk and furs, a bathing chamber with a tub large enough to swim in, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, currently curtained, but promising sunlight when morning came. "The windows," Kaelan said, noticing the direction of her gaze. "I had them fitted with adjustable curtains. You control how much light comes in. Always. If you want them open, they will be open. If you want them covered, they will be covered. Your choice." Such a small thing, such a significant gesture. The power to control her own environment, the power to choose. "Thank you," Seraphina said, and meant it more deeply than those 2 words could express. Kaelan lingered at the door, clearly reluctant to leave. "I will be in the Alpha's quarters, 1 floor up. If you need anything at all, the guards outside your door can summon me immediately." He paused. "And Seraphina, what you said about my uncle, I want you to know that I heard you. I will not dismiss your observations simply because they are difficult to hear. If Aldrich is involved in what was done to you, I will find out. And there will be justice." "I believe you," Seraphina said. And surprisingly, she found that she did. The door closed behind him, and Seraphina was alone. But this solitude felt different. Not the crushing isolation of her tower prison, but the peaceful quiet of a safe haven. She could leave this room whenever she wished. She could open the door and walk out into a castle full of people. The choice was hers. She moved to the window and drew back the curtain. The northern kingdom stretched before her, silver and black in the moonlight. Mountains and forests and the distant glitter of a river, a world she had only read about, now spread beneath her like a gift. Her wolf stirred inside her, restless but no longer desperate. They had survived. Against all odds, against 20 years of darkness and despair, they had survived. And now they stood on the threshold of something new. "We made it," Seraphina whispered to her wolf. "We are free." But even as hope bloomed in her chest, caution tempered it. Vivian's words echoed in her memory. The true master wanted you alive, wanted you to grow, wanted you to ripen. Her father's letter burned against her heart, hidden in her bodice. A powerful lord in the northern kingdom, she was free from her tower. But she was not yet safe. The enemy who had orchestrated her imprisonment was still out there, still watching, still waiting for the right moment to claim what he believed was his. Seraphina smiled into the darkness. Let him come. Let him try to take what he wanted. She was no longer the frightened child Vivian had locked away. She was a survivor, a strategist, a woman who had sharpened her mind into a weapon over 20 years of isolation. And she had found something she never expected: a mate who offered partnership instead of possession, a king who valued her mind as much as her bloodline, an ally in the war that was surely coming. One day, she had promised her wolf in that tower cell, watching the moon through a tiny window, one day we will be free, and we will make them pay. That day had finally come, and Seraphina intended to keep every single part of that promise. The first week in Blackstone Castle was the hardest thing Seraphina had ever endured. Not because anyone treated her poorly. The servants were kind and attentive. The healers were gentle and thorough. Kaelan visited every morning and evening, bringing news of the kingdom, asking her opinions on political matters, treating her like the partner she had demanded to be. The difficulty came from within. 20 years of captivity had shaped her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Open spaces made her heart race with irrational panic. The first time she walked into the Great Hall, with its vaulted ceilings and distant walls, her vision had tunneled and her breath had seized in her throat. She had stood frozen, trembling, unable to move forward or back, until Winter had quietly appeared at her side and guided her to a smaller antechamber. Unlocked doors felt wrong. Every night, Seraphina would check the door to her suite 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, unable to believe it would simply open when she turned the handle. Part of her expected to find it sealed, expected to discover that her rescue had been nothing but a cruel dream. The nightmares were the worst. She would wake screaming, clawing at phantom walls, convinced she was back in the tower. The copper taste of fear would flood her mouth. Her wolf would howl inside her, desperate and confused, unable to distinguish between memory and reality. Kaelan came to her the first night it happened. He did not enter her room without permission. He simply sat outside her door, his deep voice carrying through the wood, telling her stories about his childhood, about the mountains, about anything and everything until her breathing steadied and her heart stopped racing. "You do not have to do this," Seraphina said through the door one night, her voice raw from screaming. "You are the Alpha King. You have responsibilities. You cannot spend every night sitting in a hallway." "I can and I will," Kaelan replied calmly, "for as long as you need. My responsibilities include my mate. You are not an inconvenience, Seraphina. You are a priority." She had pressed her palm against the door, feeling the wood grain beneath her fingers, and wondered what she had done to deserve such patience. The elite guard became her unexpected support system. Winter, fierce and protective, took Seraphina under her wing like a younger sister. The silver-streaked warrior had survived her own traumas during the border war, and she understood without needing explanation why Seraphina sometimes froze in open spaces or flinched at sudden movements. "The body remembers," Winter told her during one of their walks through the castle corridors. "Even when the mind knows you are safe, the body holds on to the fear. It takes time to teach it that the danger has passed." "How long did it take you?" Seraphina asked. Winter's smile was sad but knowing. "I will let you know when it happens. Some wounds never fully heal, but they do become easier to carry." Stone, the massive Gamma, with hands like dinner plates and a face that could frighten children, appointed himself Seraphina's personal guardian during her recovery. He rarely spoke, but his presence was somehow comforting, solid, immovable, like a mountain that would stand between her and any threat. He was the one who caught her during her first panic attack in the open courtyard. She had wanted to prove she could handle the space, had walked out into the sunlight with determined steps, only to have the vast blue sky crash down upon her like a physical weight. Her knees had buckled, her vision had darkened, and then Stone's huge hands were on her shoulders, steady and grounding. "Breathe," he had rumbled, his deep voice cutting through her panic. "In through the nose, out through the mouth. Focus on my hands. You are here. You are safe. The sky cannot hurt you." She had followed his instructions, breathing in time with his counts, until the world stopped spinning and her heart stopped trying to escape her chest. "Thank you," she had whispered. Stone had simply nodded, his craggy face showing nothing but patient acceptance. "Tomorrow we try again. Smaller steps. You will get there." Ash, the quiet strategist with clever eyes and a mind like a steel trap, spent hours with Seraphina discussing the books she had read. He was fascinated by her interpretations of military tactics, the unique perspectives she had developed through years of study without the bias of practical experience. "You see patterns I have never considered," he admitted one afternoon, poring over maps in the war room. "The rest of us learn strategy through doing. We pick up habits, assumptions, blind spots. But you came to it fresh. You questioned things we all accepted as given. 20 years of having nothing but books will do that." Seraphina replied dryly. Ash looked up at her, his expression thoughtful. "I am sorry for what you endured, but I am glad you are here now. The kingdom needs minds like yours." River, who managed pack logistics with ruthless efficiency, was delighted to discover Seraphina's gift for numbers and organization. The two women spent many afternoons reorganizing the territory's resource management systems, finding inefficiencies that had gone unnoticed for years. "Finally!" River had exclaimed when Seraphina solved a supply chain problem that had plagued the eastern settlements for a decade. "Someone who understands that logistics wins wars just as surely as swords do." But it was General Magnus who became her true mentor. The old warrior, with his silver beard and eyes that had seen a lifetime of battles, sought her out 3 days after her arrival. He found her in the library, surrounded by histories of the Northern Kingdom, trying to fill the gaps in her knowledge. "Lady Seraphina," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "I knew your father." She looked up sharply. "You did?" "Fought beside him 30 years ago, during the Silverwood campaign." Magnus lowered himself into a chair across from her, his old bones creaking. "Theron saved my life. Took an arrow meant for my heart. Spent 3 weeks in the healer's tent because of me." His weathered face softened with memory. "He was the most honorable man I ever served with. When I heard he had died, I mourned. When I heard his daughter had died with him, I mourned deeper. To learn you are alive, that you survived what was done to you." He shook his head slowly. "Theron would be proud of the woman you have become." Seraphina's throat tightened. She had so few memories of her father. Fragments, impressions, the warmth of his arms, the rumble of his laugh. The letter hidden in her bodice was the most substantial piece of him she possessed. "He wrote to me," she said quietly. "Before he died. He said if I ever escaped, I should find you. He said you owed him a life debt." Magnus nodded slowly. "I do, and I will honor it. Whatever you need, Lady Seraphina, whatever I can teach you, whatever protection I can offer, it is yours." From that day forward, Magnus became her teacher in the practical arts of war. Not combat, not yet, her body was still too weak, but strategy, tactics. The difference between what looked good on paper and what actually worked on the battlefield. "Theory is a foundation," he told her during one of their lessons. "But war is chaos. Plans fall apart the moment steel meets steel. A good commander knows when to adapt, when to abandon the strategy and trust instinct." "How do you learn that without being in actual battles?" Seraphina asked. Magnus smiled, a rare expression that made his scarred face almost gentle. "War games, simulations, and most importantly, listening to those who have been there. Every scar on my body is a lesson. I will share them all with you, if you are willing to listen." She was more than willing. She was hungry for it. 2 weeks after her rescue, Seraphina felt strong enough to attend her first council meeting. Kaelan had offered to wait, to give her more time to recover, but she refused. Time was not a luxury she could afford. Not with Aldrich watching her every move, his pleasant smile never quite reaching his calculating eyes. The council chamber was a grand room with a massive oak table and 12 chairs arranged around it. Kaelan sat at the head, his presence dominating the space without effort. The 12 council members ranged from elderly advisors who had served Kaelan's father to younger lords who had earned their positions through merit or inheritance. Lord Aldrich sat at Kaelan's right hand, the position of highest honor. He smiled warmly when Seraphina entered, but she caught the flash of something darker in his eyes. Calculation. Assessment. The look of a predator sizing up potential prey. "Lady Seraphina," Aldrich said smoothly, "how delightful that you could join us. I trust you are recovering well from your ordeal?" "Quite well, Lord Aldrich. Thank you for your concern." Seraphina took the seat Kaelan had prepared for her, at his left hand, directly across from Aldrich. A deliberate positioning, a statement of her importance. The meeting began with routine matters, trade agreements, border patrol reports, tax collection updates. Seraphina listened carefully, filing away information, noting which council members seemed competent and which were merely filling seats. Then came the dispute. 2 minor lords, representing families with holdings on opposite sides of the Greenwood Forest, had been feuding over logging rights for generations. The conflict had escalated recently, with both sides accusing the other of illegal harvesting. Violence seemed imminent. The obvious solution, one council member proposed, is to divide the forest equally between them. "That was tried 40 years ago," another countered. "The boundary was disputed within a month. Then we impose a royal forestry commission to manage the entire area." Both families would see that as an overreach of Crown authority. It could spark wider unrest. The debate circled for nearly an hour, solutions proposed and discarded, tempers rising as no resolution emerged. Seraphina sat quietly, observing, thinking. Finally, Kaelan turned to her. "You have been silent, Lady Seraphina. Do you have thoughts on this matter?" Every eye in the room focused on her, some curious, some skeptical. Aldrich's gaze was sharp with interest. Seraphina stood, her voice clear and steady. "I have read about this dispute in historical records. The conflict dates back not 40 years, but nearly 200, to when the original land grant was issued by King Aldous III. The wording of that grant was deliberately ambiguous because Aldous needed both families' support for his campaign against the Eastern Alliance. He promised them both the same forest and hoped they would sort it out after his death. She paused, letting that sink in. Several council members exchanged surprised glances. The solution is not to divide the forest or impose external management. The solution is to acknowledge that the original grant was fraudulent and void both claims. The forest would then revert to Crown land. The Crown could then offer both families equal lease rights at a nominal fee, with clearly defined boundaries based on current watershed lines rather than arbitrary divisions. Both families save face because neither loses their claim. The Crown gains ultimate authority over the resource, and the watershed boundaries are natural features that cannot be disputed or moved. Silence fell over the chamber. Then Aldrich began to clap, slowly, deliberately. "Impressive, Lady Seraphina. You have read your history well." His smile was pleasant, but his eyes were not. "However, I wonder if you have considered the political implications. Both families are proud. Declaring their ancestral claims void might be seen as an insult. They could unite against the Crown, rather than accept such a ruling." Seraphina met his gaze without flinching. "You raise a valid point, Lord Aldrich, which is why I would suggest presenting the ruling as a discovery of historical fraud by King Aldous, rather than a judgment against either family. We are not voiding their claims. We are revealing that they were both victims of royal deception 2 centuries ago. We are correcting an old injustice while offering them a fair path forward." More silence. Then General Magnus chuckled, a warm sound that broke the tension. "The lady has a mind for politics," he said approvingly. "I say we try it. The current situation is untenable, and no one else has offered a better solution." Kaelan nodded slowly. "I agree. Draft the proclamation. We will present it to both families within the week." He turned to Seraphina, pride evident in his amber eyes. "Well done." But as the meeting adjourned, Seraphina did not feel triumphant. She had seen the look that passed between Aldrich and 3 other council members, quick, subtle. the silent communication of conspirators who had just received unwelcome news. She had made herself a target. She had proven herself valuable to Kaelan and therefore dangerous to those who wanted to manipulate him. The game was truly beginning now. That night, River came to Seraphina's chambers with documents hidden beneath her cloak. "You asked me to look into the treasury records," River said quietly, spreading papers across Seraphina's table. "I found something. Payments. Large sums transferred to an anonymous account, starting exactly 20 years ago. The timing matches your imprisonment perfectly." Seraphina studied the documents, her heart racing. "Can you trace the account?" "I tried. The trail goes through 3 different banking houses in 3 different territories. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing." River pointed to a series of numbers. "But here is the interesting part. The payments stopped 5 years ago, when the old royal treasurer died. They resumed 6 months later after Lord Aldrich personally appointed the new treasurer." "Aldrich has access to the treasury?" "As senior council member, he has oversight authority. He does not control the funds directly, but he could easily influence someone who does." River's face was grim. "There is more. I found records of a visit Lord Aldrich made to Moonshadow Estate, 20 years and 3 months ago, 1 week before your father died." The pieces were falling into place. Aldrich had visited her father's estate shortly before Lord Theron's death. Payments had started immediately after to someone, likely Vivienne, to maintain Seraphina's imprisonment. Aldrich had known about her existence for 20 years. He had been waiting, planning, cultivating the situation like a farmer tending a crop. "This is not enough to convict him," Seraphina said slowly. "A visit and some financial irregularities. He could explain both away." "No," River agreed, "but it is enough to know we are looking in the right direction. I will keep digging." After River left, Seraphina sat alone with the weight of what she had learned. Her father's letter had warned of a powerful lord in the Northern Kingdom. Now she had evidence pointing directly at the man sitting at the Alpha King's right hand. But evidence was not proof, and Kaelan loved his uncle. Moving against Aldrich without irrefutable proof could fracture the kingdom, could turn allies into enemies, could play directly into whatever larger scheme the Lord was orchestrating. She needed more. She needed patience. She needed to be smarter than the man who had orchestrated a 20-year conspiracy. The trial of Lady Vivienne was held 1 month after Seraphina's rescue. The Great Hall was packed with witnesses and officials. Nobles from across the Northern Kingdom had traveled to see the spectacle. A stepmother who had imprisoned a child for 20 years, a fireborn Omega who had emerged from captivity to become the Alpha King's mate. The story had spread like wildfire, growing more dramatic with each retelling. Vivienne looked diminished. 2 months of imprisonment had stripped away her elegant facade, leaving a pale, frightened woman who seemed smaller than Seraphina remembered. Her 2 daughters sat in the audience, both looking deeply uncomfortable. They had been questioned and found innocent of involvement in the conspiracy. They had genuinely believed their stepsister was dead. When Seraphina entered, walking beside Kaelan with her copper hair flowing freely down her back, heads turned throughout the hall. She wore a dress of deep green that brought out the amber in her eyes, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had faced worse than a crowded room and survived. "Lady Vivienne," the head judge intoned, "you stand accused of unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, fraud, and conspiracy. How do you plead?" "Not guilty." Vivienne's voice was barely a whisper. "I was protecting my daughters from a dangerous creature. The copper wolf is unnatural. It is—" "You will answer the charges as stated," the judge interrupted. "Your personal opinions about wolf coloring are not relevant to whether you imprisoned a child for 2 decades. The evidence was presented systematically. The enchanted silver door, the payments Vivienne had received over 20 years, the testimony of servants who had suspected something was wrong but were too frightened to investigate. Old Marta wept as she described sneaking food to the tower, her guilt at not doing more evident in every trembling word. Then Seraphina was called to speak. She stood and faced the woman who had stolen her childhood. Vivienne shrank back in her chair, unable to meet Seraphina's steady gaze. 20 years, Seraphina said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. 7,300 days. I counted every one. I scratched marks into the stone beneath my bed because it was the only way to prove to myself that time was actually passing, that I was not trapped in some endless nightmare. She took a step closer to Vivian, her movements deliberate and controlled. You took everything from me. My childhood, my adolescence, my chance to know my father before he died, my opportunity to make friends, to learn, to grow, to experience life as anything other than a prisoner in a stone cell. Her voice hardened. You did this not because I threatened anyone, but because you feared my wolf might outshine your daughters. You locked away a 6-year-old child because of jealousy, because of pettiness, because of greed. Vivian's composure cracked. Tears streamed down her face. I was paid, she gasped out. I was told to keep you alive, to keep you hidden. I did not plan any of this. I was just following orders? Seraphina interrupted coldly. That excuse has never absolved anyone of atrocity. You had a choice. Every single day for 20 years, you had a choice. You chose your comfort over a child's freedom. You chose money over morality. You chose to be a monster. She turned to face the court, her copper hair catching the light like living flame. But here is what she does not understand, what none of my captors understood. You tried to bury me, Vivian. You tried to hide me in darkness until I withered away. But you just gave me time to grow roots deeper than you could ever imagine. You gave me 20 years to read, to learn, to think, to plan. You gave me 20 years to become stronger, smarter, and more determined than I ever would have been if I had lived a normal life. She looked back at Vivian, and her smile was sharp as a blade. You thought you were destroying me. Instead, you forged me into something unbreakable. So thank you, stepmother. Thank you for making me exactly what I needed to be to face whatever comes next. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all charges. The sentence, 20 years imprisonment in a cell specifically designed to mirror the conditions Seraphina had endured. 1 year for each year stolen. As the guards led Vivian away, she screamed and fought against their grip. But Seraphina felt only cold satisfaction. Justice had been served. The first piece of her vengeance was complete, but the true enemy remained free. Somewhere in the crowd, Lord Aldrich watched with those calculating eyes, his pleasant smile firmly in place. That night, the full moon rose over Blackstone Castle. Seraphina stood in the training courtyard, surrounded by the elite guard and watched by what seemed like half the castle's population. Word had spread that the Alpha King's mate would attempt her first shift. Everyone wanted to witness the emergence of the fireborn wolf that had been imprisoned for 20 years. Ilara stood nearby, ready to intervene if something went wrong. Kaelan held Seraphina's hand, his amber eyes filled with encouragement and concern in equal measure. You do not have to do this tonight, he said quietly. We can wait. There is no rush. I have waited 20 years, Seraphina replied. I am done waiting. She closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for the wolf that had been her constant companion through 2 decades of imprisonment. The copper creature was there, as she always was, pressing against Seraphina's consciousness with desperate eagerness. It is time, Seraphina whispered to her wolf. We are finally free. Let me see you. Let everyone see what we have become. She released the control she had maintained for 20 years. The shift was explosive. Pain and pleasure mingled as her bones rearranged themselves, as her muscles expanded and contracted, as her skin rippled and transformed. She felt herself falling forward onto 4 paws, felt her perspective shift as the world became sharper, clearer, more vivid than she had ever experienced. And then she stood in her wolf form for the first time in her life. Absolute silence fell over the courtyard. Seraphina's wolf was magnificent. Copper and gold, like fire given form, larger than any female wolf should be. Her fur seemed to glow with an inner light, as if flames burned beneath the surface of her pelt. Her eyes, still that amber brown but now shining with ancient power, swept across the assembled crowd. Then the fire came. Flames erupted from her fur, dancing across her body like living creatures, not burning, not harmful, but blazing with heat and light that pushed back the night, that made the gathered wolves step back in instinctive awe. Alara dropped to her knees. "Moon goddess preserve us," she breathed. "A true fireborn, the first in 500 years." Kaelan shifted too, his massive black wolf appearing with deep red highlights that caught the firelight from Seraphina's form. He approached her slowly, reverently, and pressed his muzzle against hers in a gesture of acceptance and adoration. Then he threw his head back and howled. The sound was pure joy, pure triumph, echoing off the castle walls and rising toward the stars. One by one, the other wolves joined in. The elite guard, the castle residents, everyone adding their voices to the chorus until the night itself seemed to vibrate with the celebration. Seraphina felt something break inside her, something that had been locked away for 20 years, protected behind walls of discipline and determination. Joy. Pure, overwhelming, uncontainable joy. She had survived. She had transformed. She was finally, truly, completely free. She threw her own head back and added her howl to the pack's song. And then she ran. For the first time in 20 years, she ran. Kaelan ran beside her, their wolves perfectly matched, despite never having run together before. The elite guard flanked them, a protective formation that allowed them freedom while ensuring their safety. Through the castle gates they flew, down the mountain paths, into the forest where moonlight filtered through ancient trees. Seraphina ran until her paws ached, until her lungs burned, until tears of joy streamed from her wolf eyes and evaporated in the heat of her fiery fur. She ran until she could not run anymore, and then she collapsed in a moonlit clearing, panting and laughing in a way that wolves cannot quite manage, but somehow she did anyway. Kaelan shifted back to human form and gathered her gently in his arms as she transformed as well. They sat together in the grass, both breathing hard, both covered in sweat and moonlight and the lingering scent of copper fire. "That was incredible," Kaelan murmured against her hair. "You are incredible." "I feel incredible," Seraphina admitted. "I feel like I have been carrying a weight I did not know I was carrying, and it has finally been lifted." He pulled back to look at her face, his amber eyes soft with emotion. "I know we agreed to wait, to give you time to recover, to decide what you wanted, but I need you to know something, Seraphina." "What?" "I love you." The words were simple, but weighted with absolute sincerity. Not because of the mate bond, not because you are brilliant and useful and everything my kingdom needs in a Luna. I love you because of who you are, your strength, your determination, your refusal to let 20 years of captivity break you, your sharp tongue and sharper mind, the way you challenged Aldrich on your first night here, the way you make me want to be a better king, a better man, just to be worthy of standing beside you. Seraphina's breath caught in her throat. She had expected many things when she finally escaped her tower. Freedom, revenge, perhaps even a political alliance based on mutual benefit. She had not expected this warmth spreading through her chest, this terrifying, exhilarating feeling of falling into something she could not control. "I am not good at this," she said quietly. 20 years alone did not exactly prepare me for emotional declarations. I do not know how to be what you need. I do not know how to trust completely, how to open myself to someone without fear. "I am not asking for complete trust," Kaelan replied. "I am asking for the chance to earn it, one day at a time, one moment at a time, however long it takes." She looked at him, at this scarred king who had torn down an enchanted door with his bare hands to reach her, who had sat outside her room night after night to help her through nightmares, who had given her choice after choice when he could have simply taken what the mate bond entitled him to. "I think," she said slowly, "that I might be falling in love with you too. I am not certain. I do not have much experience with the emotion. But what I feel when I look at you, when I hear your voice, when you hold me like this, it feels like something more than the mate bond, something I chose rather than something that was chosen for me." Kaelan's smile was like sunrise breaking over mountains. "Then we will figure it out together. No rush, no pressure. just us, learning each other, building something real. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want. She met him halfway, and their lips touched for the first time. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a conversation conducted without words. Seraphina tasted moonlight and pine and the wild essence of her mate. She felt the bond between them pulse with satisfaction, two halves finally beginning to recognize they belonged together. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard again, but for entirely different reasons than before. "We should get back," Kaelan said reluctantly. "The guard is maintaining a perimeter, but we should not push our luck." "Yes," Seraphina agreed, though part of her wanted to stay in this moonlit clearing forever, suspended in this perfect moment before reality intruded again. They shifted back to wolf form and ran toward the castle, side by side, their pack surrounding them like a living shield. But reality was waiting for them. 2 hours after they returned to Blackstone Castle, Seraphina woke to the sound of her door bursting open. A dark figure lunged toward her bed, blade gleaming in the moonlight. Pure instinct took over. Seraphina rolled sideways, off the mattress and onto the floor, as the knife buried itself in the pillow where her head had been moments before. The assassin recovered quickly, pulling the blade free and advancing. He was dressed in black, his face covered, moving with the trained efficiency of a professional killer. Seraphina scrambled backward, searching desperately for a weapon, for an exit, for anything. Then Stone crashed through the window. The massive gamma slammed into the assassin like a boulder rolling downhill, driving him to the floor with crushing force. Winter came through the door a heartbeat later, sword drawn, eyes scanning for additional threats. The castle alarm bells began to ring, summoning guards from every corner of Blackstone. "Are you hurt?" Winter demanded, positioning herself between Seraphina and the door. "No." Seraphina's voice was steadier than she felt. "I woke in time. The pillow was not so fortunate." Stone had the assassin pinned, one massive hand around the man's throat. The killer was struggling, but against Stone's immense strength, it was futile. "Who sent you?" Stone demanded. "Talk, and your death will be quick. Stay silent, and I will make it slow." The assassin laughed, a disturbing sound muffled by his mask. "You cannot protect her. No one can. The Shadow has waited 20 years. He will not be denied his prize." "The Shadow?" Seraphina stepped forward despite Winter's protective arm. "That is what you call him? Who is he? Give me a name." The assassin turned his head toward her, and even through the mask, she could see his smile. "You will know soon enough, fireborn. He is closer than you think. He has always been close." Then, before anyone could stop him, he bit down hard. The crack of a glass vial breaking was followed by the acrid scent of poison. The assassin convulsed once, twice, and then went limp, dead, taking his secrets with him. Kaelan arrived seconds later, bursting through the door in a state of barely controlled fury. He took in the scene with one glance: the dead assassin, the destroyed pillow, Seraphina standing pale but unharmed. "Report," he commanded, his voice tight with rage. "Assassination attempt," Winter said crisply. "Professional." He got past 2 guard rotations without triggering any alarms. Someone gave him the patrol schedules. "Inside help," Kaelan growled. "Someone in the castle." "He mentioned someone called the Shadow," Seraphina said. "Said he has been waiting 20 years, that he is closer than I think." Kaelan's jaw tightened. His eyes met Seraphina's, and she saw the conflict there, the suspicion warring with familial loyalty, the growing certainty battling against the hope that he was wrong. "We need to find proof," he said quietly. "Undeniable proof. Until then, we trust no one outside this room." The next morning, a messenger arrived from the eastern border. Rogue wolves had attacked the settlement of Eastwatch. 200 wolves organized and coordinated, using tactics that spoke of military training rather than wild savagery. 50 civilians dead, 100 more wounded. The settlement's small garrison had been overwhelmed in minutes. "This is not a random attack," General Magnus said grimly as the War Council assembled. Rogues do not move in formations. They do not coordinate assaults. Someone is controlling them. How many more settlements are at risk? Kaelan asked. 3 more within a day's march. If we do not respond immediately, the entire eastern corridor could fall. Then we respond immediately. Kaelan stood, his presence commanding every eye in the room. Magnus, prepare 3 companies of infantry and 1 of cavalry. We leave within the hour. I am coming with you, Seraphina said. Every head turned toward her. Kaelan's expression shifted through surprise, concern, and finally something like pride. You are not yet fully recovered, he said carefully. Your wolf has only emerged once. Combat is— I am not proposing to lead a charge, Seraphina interrupted. But I have fireborn abilities that could protect civilians if the settlement is attacked again, and I will not sit safely in the castle while my mate rides into danger. She met his eyes steadily. Partners, that is what we agreed. Partners do not hide behind walls while the other fights. Lord Aldrich spoke from his seat at the table, his voice smooth as oil. Surely the lady's safety is paramount. It would be unwise to risk the fireborn bloodline on a simple border skirmish. The lady can speak for herself, Seraphina replied coolly. And the lady has made her decision. Unless the Alpha King directly forbids it, I am going. Kaelan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Stone and Winter stay with you at all times. If the situation becomes too dangerous, you retreat. No arguments. Agreed, Seraphina said. They rode east through the day and into the night, a column of warriors pushing hard to reach Eastwatch before another attack could fall. Seraphina rode beside Kaelan, her body aching from the unfamiliar exercise, but her determination unwavering. They arrived at dawn to find the settlement in chaos. The rogue wolves had returned during the night. A second wave, even larger than the first, had swept through the defenses like water through sand. Bodies lay in the streets, buildings burned. The survivors huddled in the central square, surrounded by the remnants of the garrison, fighting a desperate last stand against an enemy that seemed to never stop coming. Kaelan did not hesitate. He shifted mid-stride, his massive black wolf erupting into existence, and led the charge directly into the enemy ranks. His warriors followed, a wave of fur and fang and righteous fury crashing into the rogues. Seraphina did not follow the charge. Instead, she ran toward the survivors in the square, Stone and Winter flanking her. The civilians were terrified, wounded, many of them children clinging to parents who could offer no real protection against the monsters surrounding them. A group of rogues broke off from the main battle, circling toward the square. They had spotted easier prey, helpless victims who could not fight back. Seraphina shifted. Her copper wolf emerged with a roar of fire and fury. The flames that had danced along her fur the night before now blazed with purpose, with intent. She reached deep inside herself, found the power Alara had described, the ancient magic of the fireborn, and she let it loose. A wall of copper fire erupted from the ground in a circle around the entire square, 20 feet high, blazing with heat that made the approaching rogues skid to a halt, yelping as their fur singed from proximity alone. The flames did not burn the civilians inside the circle. They did not harm the defenders. They recognized friend from foe with an intelligence that seemed almost alive. "Moon goddess," one of the garrison soldiers breathed, staring at the wall of fire with awestruck eyes. The fireborn. The stories were true. Seraphina held the wall. She poured everything she had into maintaining it, feeling her energy drain with each passing moment, but refusing to let it fall. Behind that barrier, 300 civilians were safe, 300 lives that the rogues could not touch. The battle raged for 4 hours. Kaelan and his forces cut through the rogues with devastating efficiency. General Magnus commanded the flanks with decades of experience, closing escape routes, preventing reinforcements. The elite guard fought like demons possessed, each warrior worth 10 of the disorganized rogues. When the last rogue fell, when the settlement finally fell silent, except for the moans of the wounded and the crackling of Seraphina's flames, Kaelan shifted back to human form and walked toward the wall of fire. The flames parted for him, recognizing their Luna's mate, allowing him to pass through unharmed. He found Seraphina still in wolf form, trembling with exhaustion, but still holding the barrier. Her copper fur was dim, the flames flickering weakly, but she had not let them fall. 4 hours. She had protected 300 people for 4 hours. "It is over," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "You can let go now. They are safe. You saved them." The wall of fire guttered and died. Seraphina shifted back to human form and collapsed into Kaelan's arms, utterly spent but triumphant. 300, she whispered. "I counted them while I held the wall. 300 people who would have died without you, without your army, without me." "You did well," Kaelan murmured, holding her close. "You did incredibly well." But even as the survivors began to emerge from behind where the firewall had stood, even as they looked at Seraphina with something approaching worship, Ash approached with a grim expression. "We captured 3 rogues alive," he reported. "I questioned them. These were not wild wolves, Alpha. They were recruited, trained, paid." "By whom?" "They call their employer the Shadow, but there is more." Ash glanced at Seraphina with something like apology in his eyes. "This attack was not about the settlement. It was a distraction. They were told to draw you out of Blackstone, to get you away from the castle, while something else happened." Kaelan's face went pale. "What happened at Blackstone?" "I do not know yet, but we should return immediately." They rode through the night, pushing their mounts to the edge of endurance. Seraphina, still weak from maintaining the firewall, rode double with Kaelan, his arms around her, his heart pounding against her back. They arrived at Blackstone Castle as dawn broke to find chaos. Half the council had met in emergency session during the night. Aldrich had presented evidence, fabricated but convincing, that Kaelan was under the influence of fireborn magic. That Seraphina had enchanted him, twisted his mind, was using him as a puppet to seize power. 6 of 12 council members had voted to suspend Kaelan's authority pending investigation. "They cannot do that," Kaelan snarled when River delivered the report. "The council does not have authority to suspend the Alpha King." "They invoked emergency powers," River said quietly, "an obscure clause from 200 years ago. Aldrich found it. He presented it as concern for your well-being, as protection against magical manipulation. The council members who voted with him genuinely believe they are helping you." "And those who know better are too afraid to speak against him," Magnus added grimly. "Aldrich has been building this network for years, perhaps decades. Favors owed, secrets kept, threats implied. Half the castle is loyal to him without even realizing it." Seraphina stepped forward, her exhaustion forgotten in the face of this new threat. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is what he has been building toward. 20 years of patience, and now he is making his move." Kaelan looked at her, and she saw the pain in his eyes, the betrayal, the shattering of trust in someone he had loved like a second father. "We need proof," he said hoarsely. "Undeniable proof. Without it, I am just an Alpha King trying to purge his own council. It will tear the kingdom apart." "Then we find the proof," Seraphina replied, taking his hand. "Together, whatever it takes, however long it takes. We find the truth, and we expose it." She squeezed his fingers, feeling the mate bond pulse between them, feeling his pain and his determination, and his desperate hope that there was still a way to fix this without destroying everything he had built. "I survived 20 years in a tower," she said softly. "I can survive whatever Aldrich throws at us. And when we are done, when we have exposed him for what he truly is, he will understand what a mistake he made. He thought he was cultivating a weapon. He thought he could control the fireborn." Her eyes blazed with the reflection of flames that were not quite visible, but somehow present nonetheless. He was wrong. The council chamber had become a battlefield without blood. Seraphina stood at Kaelan's side as they faced the assembled lords, her chin lifted, her copper hair blazing like a banner of war in the morning light that streamed through the tall windows. Across the massive oak table, Lord Aldrich sat with the composed patience of a man who believed he had already won. "This emergency session was called out of concern for our beloved Alpha King. Aldrich said, his voice smooth as honey poured over poison. The fireborn bloodline carries inherent dangers. Ancient texts speak of their ability to influence minds, to bend wills to their purpose. We must ensure that His Majesty's judgment has not been compromised. My judgment is perfectly clear, Kaelan replied, his voice tight with controlled fury. Clear enough to recognize a coup when I see one. Murmurs rippled through the council. Several members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Seraphina studied each face, cataloging reactions, identifying who was genuinely deceived and who was willingly complicit. "Nephew, please." Aldrich's expression was the picture of wounded concern. "No one is attempting a coup. We are simply following established protocol. The Emergency Powers Clause exists precisely for situations like this, when the Alpha King may be unable to recognize threats to his own sovereignty." "A clause you discovered conveniently after I found my mate," Kaelan observed. "A clause that has not been invoked in 2 centuries, a clause that requires only a simple majority to strip the Alpha King of his authority." "The timing is unfortunate, I grant you." Aldrich spread his hands in a gesture of helpless regret. "But the concern is genuine." Lady Seraphina appeared from nowhere, claiming to be the daughter of a lord dead for 20 years. Within weeks, she has inserted herself into council meetings, influenced military decisions, and demonstrated powers that have not been seen in 5 centuries. Can you truly blame us for being cautious? Seraphina stepped forward before Kaelan could respond. "Lord Aldrich raises valid points," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I did appear suddenly. I do possess unusual abilities. It is reasonable to question my motives." Aldrich's eyes narrowed slightly, clearly not expecting her to agree with him. "However," Seraphina continued, "I find myself curious about something. You speak of fireborn influence as if it were established fact, yet the ancient texts I have read describe fireborn powers as purely physical. Fire creation, protection, healing through controlled heat. Nowhere in any historical record is there mention of mind control or will bending." She began to pace slowly along her side of the table, her movements deliberate, commanding attention. "So I must ask, Lord Aldrich, where did you find this information about fireborn mind control? What source describes abilities that no historical text mentions? Because it seems to me that someone has been spreading misinformation, someone who needed the council to fear me, someone who has been planning this moment for a very long time." The chamber fell silent. Aldrich's pleasant expression flickered, just for an instant, before settling back into benevolent concern. "The young lady is clever," he acknowledged. "But cleverness is not the same as innocence. I have consulted with scholars, with historians, with experts in ancient bloodlines. The information I presented came from reputable sources." "Name them." "I beg your pardon?" "Name your sources." Seraphina stopped pacing and faced him directly. "You have accused me of magical manipulation. You have used that accusation to suspend the Alpha King's authority. Surely you can provide the names of the scholars and historians who gave you this information. We can summon them, question them, verify their credentials." Another flicker of something dark behind Aldrich's eyes. "That would take time. The situation required immediate action." "The situation required immediate action because you could not afford to wait," Seraphina replied. "You needed to move while the Alpha King was away from the castle. You needed to present your fabricated evidence before anyone could examine it too closely. You needed the council to act on fear rather than facts." "These are serious accusations." Aldrich's voice had lost some of its smoothness. "I hope you have proof to support them." "I do." Seraphina gestured to River, who had been waiting by the door. The intelligence officer stepped forward, carrying a leather satchel thick with documents. "Treasury records," Seraphina announced as River began distributing papers to each council member, "showing payments from the royal coffers to an anonymous account beginning exactly 20 years ago. The timing coincides precisely with my imprisonment in the North Tower of Moonshadow Estate." She paused, letting the council members examine the documents. "Travel records," she continued, "showing that Lord Aldrich visited Moonshadow Estate 20 years and 3 months ago. 1 week before my father, Lord Theron, died of a sudden illness that no healer could explain. More papers distributed. More uncomfortable shifting among the council. And finally, testimony. Seraphina nodded toward the door, where Stone escorted in an elderly woman, old Marta, the servant who had brought food to the tower for 2 decades. This woman will swear under oath that she received instructions from Lady Vivian to maintain my imprisonment. Instructions that Lady Vivian admitted came from a powerful lord who paid her handsomely for her cooperation. Aldrich rose from his chair, his mask of benevolence finally cracking. This is absurd. Circumstantial evidence and the ramblings of a frightened servant. You cannot prove any connection between these documents and myself. Perhaps not, Seraphina agreed, but I can prove this. She pulled a folded letter from her bodice, the letter she had carried against her heart since finding it in her tower cell. Her father's final message. This letter was written by my father shortly before his death. In it, he warns me that a powerful lord in the Northern Kingdom has been asking questions about my fireborn bloodline. He warns me that this lord has been building alliances in secret. He warns me that the danger comes from within. She looked directly at Aldrich. He does not name you directly. He was too cautious for that. But he describes you perfectly. Patient, ambitious, willing to wait decades for the right moment to seize power. A dead man's suspicions are not proof, Aldrich spat, abandoning any pretense of calm. No, but combined with the financial records, the travel records, and the testimony of those who worked for your puppet Vivian, they paint a very clear picture. Seraphina turned to address the full council. Lord Aldrich has spent 20 years orchestrating a conspiracy. He killed my father to prevent him from hiding me away. He paid Lady Vivian to imprison me, to keep me alive and isolated until my fireborn powers fully matured. He built a network of allies and informants within this very council. And now, when his nephew finally found his mate and threatened to become too strong to control, Aldrich made his move. She let her gaze sweep across each council member in turn. Some of you supported him knowingly. You have chosen your side, and you will face the consequences. But others were deceived. You truly believed you were protecting your king from magical manipulation. To you, I offer this chance. Examine the evidence. Think for yourselves. And decide whether you want to be remembered as the council that betrayed their rightful Alpha King, or the council that stood for truth when it mattered most. Silence held the chamber like a physical force. Then Lord Aldrich laughed. It was not the pleasant chuckle of a benevolent uncle. It was cold, hard, the sound of a predator dropping its disguise. Well played, Lady Seraphina. I underestimated you. I thought 20 years in isolation would leave you broken, malleable, easy to control once I finally claimed you. Instead, you emerged sharper than any blade in my arsenal. He began to clap slowly. Truly impressive. Your father would be proud. You admit it? Kaelan's voice was barely a whisper, thick with betrayal and rage. Aldrich turned to his nephew with something like pity in his eyes. Oh, dear boy, did you truly never suspect? I have been guiding events since before you were born. Your father was too weak, too honorable, too bound by sentiment. He would have led this kingdom into ruin. So I arranged for his death at the Battle of Mist Pass. A few words to the right enemy commander, a gap in our defenses, at just the right moment. And suddenly, I was regent for a grieving young prince. Kaelan staggered as if struck. Seraphina reached for his hand, steadying him. You killed my father. The words came out broken, each syllable carrying 20 years of misplaced grief and trust. I removed an obstacle, Aldrich corrected, just as I removed Lord Theron when he discovered what I was planning, just as I will remove anyone who stands between me and what I deserve. His eyes moved to Seraphina. The fireborn bloodline can control thousands of wolves simultaneously. With that power at my command, I could build an empire that spans the entire continent. All I needed was patience, 20 years of patience, cultivating the perfect weapon. I am not a weapon, Seraphina said quietly, and I am certainly not yours. Not yet. Aldrich's smile was terrible. But you will be. You see, while you were delivering your impressive speech, my forces were taking position. The castle is surrounded, the loyal guards have been neutralized, and the 6 Alpha Lords I have been cultivating for the past decade are marching their armies toward our borders as we speak. He gestured towards the windows, and Seraphina saw movement in the courtyard below, soldiers in unfamiliar colors, warriors who did not bear the Northern Kingdom's insignia. You thought you were exposing me, Aldrich continued. You thought your evidence would turn the council against me. But I have planned for every contingency. I have been planning for 20 years. Did you really think a few documents and a servant's testimony would stop me? No, Seraphina said calmly. I thought it would make you reveal yourself, and it did. Aldrich's confident expression flickered with uncertainty. You see, Lord Aldrich, you are not the only one who can plan ahead. Seraphina allowed herself a small smile. While you were positioning your forces around the castle, General Magnus was positioning ours outside the territory. 3,000 loyal soldiers hidden in the mountain passes, waiting for the signal. As if on cue, horns began to sound in the distance. Not the horns of Aldrich's allies, but the deep, resonant call of the Northern Kingdom's military, the sound of an army arriving. You planned for every contingency, Seraphina said, but you did not plan for me. You spent 20 years thinking of me as a prize to be claimed. You never once considered that I might be an opponent. Aldrich's face contorted with rage. It does not matter. Even if your soldiers retake the castle, I still have enough loyal forces to hold half the kingdom. The civil war will last years. Thousands will die. Is that what you want? No, Kaelan spoke, his voice steady now, hardened by the transformation of grief into cold resolve. What I want is to end this. Here. Now. Between us. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Seraphina and his uncle. Alpha challenge, Kaelan declared, his voice carrying through the chamber with the weight of ancient tradition. I invoke the right of direct combat. Leadership of the Northern Kingdom decided by single combat between claimants. If you believe you should rule, Uncle, then prove it with your own strength rather than your schemes. The council members exchanged shocked glances. Alpha challenges were rare in modern times, relics of a more brutal age, but the tradition still held legal weight. If Aldrich accepted, the outcome would be binding. His allies would have no grounds to continue fighting. Aldrich studied his nephew with calculating eyes. You are younger, faster, but I have 30 years of combat experience. I trained you myself. I know every move you will make before you make it. Then you should have no fear of accepting. A long moment of tension stretched between them. Then Aldrich nodded slowly. Very well. Alpha challenge accepted. We fight at sunset in the great courtyard. Winner takes all. His gaze shifted to Seraphina, including the fireborn. I am not a prize to be won, Seraphina said coldly. We shall see. Shall. Aldrich turned and walked from the chamber, his remaining loyal council members falling into step behind him. The moment he was gone, Seraphina gripped Kaelan's arm. You cannot fight him alone. He admitted to killing your father, to planning this for decades. He will not fight fairly. I know. Kaelan's jaw was set, his amber eyes burning with determination. But the Alpha challenge is sacred. If I refuse, or if I cheat, I lose the moral authority to rule. Half the kingdom would never accept my leadership. So you will face a man who has been plotting against you for your entire life, who knows all your fighting techniques, who has already proven he will do anything to win. Kaelan turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. He knows the techniques he taught me. He does not know the ones I learned after. Magnus has been training me in styles Aldrich never mastered. And more than that, he raised her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I have something to fight for that I never had before, someone to come back to. Seraphina's heart clenched. If you die, I will not die. I refuse to die. I waited 8 years to find you. I will not lose you now. The hours until sunset passed like years. Seraphina watched the preparations with growing dread. The great courtyard was cleared. Torches were lit around the perimeter. Both armies, Kaelan's loyal forces and Aldrich's rebels, gathered on opposite sides of the space, a temporary truce holding while the ancient ritual played out. She found Kaelan in the armory, selecting a sword. He had stripped to simple combat leathers, his scarred torso visible through the open vest. The scar across his eye seemed more pronounced in the dim light. "I have been thinking," she said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "Dangerous habit." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Aldrich expects you to fight with honor. He expects you to follow the rules of the challenge." "That is why he accepted. He knows how to beat an honorable opponent." "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that honor is a luxury afforded to those who face honorable enemies. Aldrich has spent 20 years lying, scheming, murdering. He does not deserve the courtesy of a fair fight." Kaelan set down the sword and turned to face her fully. "You want me to cheat? I want you to survive." Seraphina's voice cracked with emotion she could not contain. "I spent 20 years alone. I found you less than 2 months ago. I cannot lose you now. I cannot." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close against his chest. "You will not lose me. I promise. Do not make promises you cannot keep." "I have never broken a promise to you." He pulled back to look into her eyes. "I will not start now." The sunset painted the sky in copper and gold as the combatants took their positions. Kaelan stood on one side of the courtyard, his borrowed sword gleaming in the dying light. Across from him, Aldrich waited with the patient confidence of a spider at the center of its web. Both men wore minimal armor. Both carried single blades. Traditional, lethal. General Magnus stepped forward to announce the terms. "Alpha challenge between King Kaelan of the Northern Kingdom and Lord Aldrich of House Blackthorn. Combat to submission or death. The victor will be recognized as the rightful ruler. May the moon goddess guide the worthy." He stepped back, and for a long moment, uncle and nephew simply stared at each other across the torchlit space. Then Aldrich moved. He was fast for his age, faster than he had any right to be. His blade whistled through the air in an opening strike designed to end the fight quickly. Kaelan deflected, barely, the impact jarring his arm. "You always were too slow on your left side," Aldrich taunted, pressing the attack. "I warned you about that when you were 12. Steel rang against steel as Kaelan parried and retreated, giving ground before his uncle's ferocious assault. Seraphina watched from the sidelines, her hands clenched so tightly her nails drew blood from her palms. "He is playing defensive," Winter murmured beside her, "letting Aldrich tire himself out." "Or being overwhelmed," Stone countered grimly. The fight continued, brutal and beautiful in its violence. Aldrich fought like a man possessed, every strike carrying decades of frustrated ambition. Kaelan defended with the desperate determination of someone protecting everything he loved. Blood appeared first on Kaelan's arm, a shallow cut that made Seraphina's heart lurch. Then on Aldrich's shoulder, a matching wound that proved the king was not merely defending. They circled each other, both breathing hard, both bleeding, neither willing to yield. "You could have had everything," Aldrich snarled between exchanges. "I would have made you a puppet king, comfortable and safe. You could have kept your fireborn mate, had children, lived a pleasant life, while I handled the difficult business of actually ruling. I would rather die than be your puppet. That can be arranged." Aldrich launched into a complex combination, a technique Kaelan recognized from years of training. He responded automatically, deflecting each strike exactly as he had been taught. Too late, he realized it was a trap. Aldrich's blade twisted at an unexpected angle, a modification to the technique that Kaelan had never seen. The sword sliced across Kaelan's thigh, a deep wound that made him stumble and nearly fall. "I taught you that combination," Aldrich said, circling his wounded nephew like a vulture. "Did you think I would not have a counter prepared? I have had 20 years to prepare counters for everything I taught you." Kaelan struggled to his feet, putting weight on his injured leg with a grimace of pain. Blood soaked his leather pants, dripping onto the cobblestones. "Yield," Aldrich commanded. "Yield, and I will let you live. You can watch as I build the empire your weakness would never have allowed. You can see what true ambition accomplishes." "Never." Kaelan straightened, ignoring the agony in his leg. His amber eyes found Seraphina in the crowd, and something passed between them, strength flowing through the mate bond, love and determination, and an absolute refusal to surrender. "You taught me many things, Uncle." Kaelan shifted his stance, adopting a position Aldrich did not recognize. "But Magnus taught me more." He attacked. The style was completely different from anything Aldrich had seen. Not the flowing elegance he had drilled into Kaelan since childhood, but something older, more brutal. A military form developed in the trenches of real warfare, where survival mattered more than beauty. Aldrich faltered, suddenly on the defensive, unable to predict movements he had never seen before. Kaelan pressed the advantage, fighting through the pain in his leg, channeling his rage and grief and love into every strike. The tide turned. Kaelan's blade found Aldrich's arm, then his leg, then his side. Wounds accumulated on the older man's body. His movements slowed. His breathing grew ragged. "This is impossible," Aldrich gasped, retreating before his nephew's relentless assault. "I planned everything. I prepared for everything. Kaelan's sword swept upward, knocking Aldrich's blade from his grip. A kick to the chest sent the older man sprawling onto his back, and then Kaelan stood over him, sword point at his uncle's throat, breathing hard, but victorious. "You planned for the nephew you raised," Kaelan said quietly. "You did not plan for the king I became." "Finish it then," Aldrich spat, all pretense of dignity abandoned. "Kill me. That is what you want, is it not? Revenge for your father, for your mate's imprisonment, for all my crimes?" Kaelan's grip tightened on his sword. Every muscle in his body screamed to end it, to plunge the blade into the heart of the man who had destroyed so much. "Kaelan!" Seraphina's voice cut through his rage. He looked up to find her standing at the edge of the combat circle, her copper hair blazing in the torchlight. "Do not kill him. He murdered my father. He imprisoned you for 20 years. He tried to steal my kingdom." "I know." Seraphina stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "And he deserves death, but death is too easy, too quick. He would escape into oblivion, and all his crimes would end in a single moment of pain." She stopped beside Kaelan, looking down at the defeated man who had orchestrated so much suffering. "Let him live," she said. "Let him live in a cell, stripped of power, stripped of allies, stripped of everything he spent decades building. Let him wake every morning knowing that his grand plans came to nothing. Let him spend years, decades, watching the kingdom thrive under the nephew he tried to destroy and the fireborn he tried to claim." She knelt beside Aldrich, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the silent courtyard. "You wanted to control me. You wanted to use my power for your empire. Instead, you will watch as I use it to build something you could never imagine, something based on justice and compassion, rather than manipulation and fear. That is your punishment, Lord Aldrich. You will live long enough to see everything you stood for proven wrong." Aldrich's face contorted with impotent rage. "You will regret this mercy. Someday, somehow, I will find a way to—" "No!" Seraphina's voice was ice. "You will not, because every day of your imprisonment you will be reminded of what you lost. Every day you will know that your 20 years of planning were undone by the very weapon you tried to forge." She stood and turned away. "I was never your prize, Lord Aldrich. I was your doom." Kaelan lowered his sword. "Take him," he commanded, and guards rushed forward to drag Aldrich away. The former lord screamed curses and threats, but no one listened. His power was broken. His allies were surrendering. His 20-year conspiracy had ended in total defeat. The mating ceremony took place 1 month later, under the brightest full moon of the year. The great courtyard that had hosted the Alpha Challenge was transformed. Garlands of copper and gold flowers draped every surface. Torches blazed in carefully arranged patterns, creating a circle of light that seemed to capture the moonlight itself. Every noble in the northern kingdom had come to witness, along with representatives from allied territories who wanted to see the legendary fireborn Luna with their own eyes. Seraphina stood at the center of the circle, wearing a gown of copper and gold that her seamstresses had spent weeks creating. The fabric seemed to shimmer with inner fire, matching the flames that danced along her skin when she let her power surface. Her hair, that massive copper cascade that had been her burden and her badge of survival, was woven into an elaborate crown atop her head, threaded with gold ribbons and tiny crystals that caught the light. She had never felt more beautiful. She had never felt more herself. Kaelan approached from the opposite side of the circle, dressed in formal black with auburn and red accents that matched the highlights in his hair. The scar across his eye was visible, unhidden, a mark of battles fought and won. He moved with the confidence of a king who had defeated his enemies and earned his throne through blood and will. Their eyes met across the sacred space, and everything else faded away. The crowd, the ceremony, the weight of politics and expectations. In that moment, there was only them, only the bond that had drawn him to her tower window, only the love that had grown through shared trials and triumphs. General Magnus performed the ceremony, his gruff voice carrying the ancient words with unexpected tenderness. He had asked for the honor, claiming that Lord Theron would have wanted it this way. Seraphina had wept when he made the request. "Under the light of the moon goddess," Magnus intoned, "we gather to witness the union of King Kaelan and Lady Seraphina, two wolves bound by fate, choosing each other in freedom." He turned to Kaelan. "Do you accept this woman as your mate, your Luna, your equal in all things? Do you swear to protect her, honor her, and stand beside her through whatever trials the future may bring?" "I do." Kaelan's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Seraphina's face. "Not because of the mate bond, not because my kingdom needs a Luna. I accept her because she is extraordinary, because she survived what would have broken anyone else and emerged stronger, because she challenges me, supports me, and makes me want to be worthy of standing beside her." Magnus turned to Seraphina. "Do you accept this man as your mate, your alpha, your equal in all things? Do you swear to support him, counsel him, and stand beside him through whatever trials the future may bring?" Seraphina felt tears pricking at her eyes, happy tears, free tears. "I do. Not because I had no other choice, not because he rescued me from my prison. I accept him because he gave me choices when he could have simply taken, because he saw me as a partner, not a possession, because he sat outside my door through my nightmares and never asked for anything in return, because he is the king my father's letter told me to find, even if neither of us knew it at the time." Magnus smiled, the expression softening his battle-hardened face. "Then by the authority vested in me and under the witness of the moon goddess herself, I declare you mated. Let the bond be sealed." Kaelan stepped forward and tilted Seraphina's head gently, exposing the curve of her neck. His canines extended, and he bit down, marking her as his mate before all the world. The pain was brief, immediately washed away by a flood of warmth as the bond between them deepened, solidified, became something unbreakable. When she marked him in return, Seraphina felt their souls intertwine, two separate beings becoming something greater than either could be alone, partners, equals, mates in every sense of the word. The crowd erupted in cheers and howls. The elite guard was the loudest, Winter and Stone and Ash and River adding their voices to the celebration. Even the noble visitors, many of whom had been skeptical of the fireborn Luna, found themselves swept up in the joy of the moment. Seraphina raised her hands, and copper fire bloomed from her palms, not threatening, not destructive. The flames danced upward in celebration, forming shapes in the air, wolves running, stars spinning, two hearts intertwined. The fireborn power that Aldrich had wanted to weaponize became something beautiful, something joyous, a gift rather than a tool of conquest. "My Luna," Kaelan murmured, pulling her close. "My partner, my love, my Alpha," she replied, smiling through her tears. "My choice, my home." They kissed as the flames spiraled around them, and the Northern Kingdom celebrated the beginning of a new era. 5 years passed like a dream. The Northern Kingdom prospered under its king and Luna. Trade flourished. The borders held secure. Reforms that Kaelan had dreamed of were implemented with Seraphina's strategic brilliance guiding the process. Omega rights expanded throughout the territory. Education initiatives reached even the most remote settlements. Justice was administered fairly, without favor to wealth or status. And in the royal chambers of Blackstone Castle, 3 children had come to fill the halls with laughter. The twins, Ember and Aurora, were 3 years old now. Copper-haired like their mother, with their father's amber eyes. Ember had already shown signs of fireborn ability, creating tiny flames in her palm that made her giggle with delight. Aurora seemed to have inherited Kaelan's strength, wrestling with the palace puppies and winning despite being smaller than all of them. Their brother Theron, named for the grandfather he would never meet, was 6 months old and already the most spoiled prince in the kingdom. His hair was dark auburn like his father's, but his eyes held flecks of copper that suggested his mother's bloodline ran strong in him as well. Seraphina sat in the private garden of Blackstone Castle, watching her daughters chase butterflies while their brother napped in a basket beside her chair. The afternoon sun warmed her skin, a sensation she had once thought she would never feel again. The copper waves of her hair, still long, still beautiful, caught the light as she turned her head. She had kept the hair. Kaelan had been right. It was a warrior's trophy, a reminder of what she had survived and overcome. Footsteps approached, and she looked up to find Kaelan walking toward her. 5 years of peace had softened some of his edges, added laugh lines around his eyes, but he was still the imposing Alpha King who had torn down her prison door. Still the man whose amber eyes made her heart race every time they met hers. "Magnus sends his regards," Kaelan said, settling into the chair beside her. "The border patrols report nothing unusual. The alliance with the Eastern Territories is holding, and Lord Aldrich tried to bribe a guard again." "Did it work?" "The guard reported the attempt immediately and refused the gold." Kaelan smiled grimly. 5 years in that cell, and he still has not accepted that his power is truly gone. He keeps scheming, keeps planning, keeps believing he can find a way out. "Good." Seraphina's voice held no sympathy. "Let him scheme. Let him plan. Let him spend every day knowing that his schemes will never succeed. That is the punishment he chose when he built his conspiracy on the suffering of others." Ember came running over, her small face bright with excitement. "Mama, Mama, I made the butterfly land on my finger. I made a tiny warm spot, and it liked it, and it sat there, and Aurora tried to catch it, but I told her no because it was my friend." "That is wonderful, little flame." Seraphina scooped her daughter into her lap. "But remember what we talked about? Fire is for helping, not for showing off." I know. Ember squirmed with childish impatience. "Fire protects. Fire heals. Fire does not hurt unless someone is being really, really bad. That is my girl." Aurora appeared a moment later, slightly out of breath from chasing her sister. "Papa, Winter says she will teach me sword fighting when I am 5. Can I start early, please? I am already stronger than the other pups my age." Kaelan laughed, lifting Aurora onto his knee. "We will discuss it with Winter. If she thinks you are ready, then perhaps we can begin with wooden practice swords." The afternoon passed in simple pleasures, playing with the children, sharing a meal as a family, watching the sun set over the mountains that Seraphina had once only been able to glimpse through a tiny tower window. That evening, after the children were in bed and the castle had quieted, a servant brought word that a visitor had arrived, a young woman, barely 18, who had traveled alone across 3 territories to reach Blackstone Castle. Seraphina met her in the small audience chamber, the one reserved for private conversations rather than formal proceedings. The girl was thin, hollow-eyed, with the hunted look of someone who had been running for a long time. "Your Majesty." The girl dropped into a clumsy curtsy. "I am sorry to disturb you. I know it is late, but I had nowhere else to go. My pack cast me out. They said I was worthless, that an Omega without special abilities is a burden no one should have to carry. They said—" Her voice broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Seraphina rose from her chair and crossed to the trembling girl. Gently, she lifted the young woman's chin until their eyes met. "What is your name?" "Lily, Your Majesty." "Lily." Seraphina smiled warmly. "I want to tell you a story about a little girl who was locked in a tower when she was 6 years old, a girl everyone forgot, a girl who spent 20 years alone, told she was worthless, told she was dangerous, told she should never have existed." Lily's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "That girl did not die in her tower," Seraphina continued. "She learned, she grew, she became strong in ways no one expected, and when she finally escaped, she discovered that all those years of suffering had forged her into something unbreakable." She took Lily's hands in her own. "You are not worthless. You are not a burden. You are exactly what you need to be at this moment in your life. The world may not see your value yet, but that does not mean the value is not there. It only means the world has not looked closely enough." "But I do not have any powers," Lily whispered. "I am just ordinary." "There is no such thing as ordinary." Seraphina's voice was firm. "Every wolf has gifts. Some are obvious, like fire or strength or speed. Others are quieter, compassion, loyalty, the ability to listen when others need to be heard, the courage to travel alone across 3 territories to ask for help." She released Lily's hands and stepped back. "You will stay here. You will be given food, shelter, and the opportunity to find your place. There are training programs, educational opportunities, positions in the castle staff if you are interested. What you make of those opportunities is up to you." "I do not know how to thank you, Your Majesty." "You can thank me by proving your old pack wrong, by becoming everything they said you could not be, by living a life so full and meaningful that their rejection becomes the best thing that ever happened to you." Seraphina smiled. "That is what I did, and look at me now." Later that night, after Lily had been settled in guest quarters, Seraphina stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, looking out over the kingdom she had never expected to rule. Kaelan came to stand beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Another lost soul for your collection," he said, but his voice was warm with approval. "They are not a collection. They are the future." Seraphina leaned into his embrace. "Every wolf we help, every outcast we welcome, every broken spirit we help heal, becomes part of something larger. They remember kindness. They pass it on. They build a world where fewer children end up locked in towers." "Is that why you do it? To prevent what happened to you from happening to others?" "Partly." She turned in his arms to face him. "But also because I know what it feels like to be alone, to believe you have no value, to think that no one in the world cares whether you live or die. If I can take that feeling away from even one person, then all those years in the tower become worth something." Kaelan kissed her forehead. "Have I told you lately that you are extraordinary? You may have mentioned it once or twice. Not nearly often enough." He pulled her closer. "My Luna, my partner, my love. I thank the moon goddess every day for leading me to that tower window." Seraphina smiled against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. 20 years in darkness, 5 years in light, and a lifetime still ahead of them. She had survived. She had thrived. She had transformed from a prisoner into a queen, from a victim into a protector, from a forgotten child into a legend that would be told for generations. And when her descendants asked about the Luna with the copper hair and the fire in her soul, the storytellers would speak of a girl who was buried in darkness and emerged as light, a girl who refused to be broken, a girl who turned 20 years of suffering into the strength to change the world. They would speak of Seraphina, the copper wolf, who proved that no prison could hold a spirit determined to be free, who proved that the darkest chapters of our lives can forge us into exactly what we need to be, who proved that love, true love, was worth waiting 20 years, or 100 years, or an eternity to find. And they would tell young wolves who felt lost, broken, forgotten, the same words Seraphina told every outcast who came to her door. You are not broken. You are being forged, and when the moon goddess is finished with you, you will be magnificent.